Hey, hi. Welcome once again to the 17th Annual Newburyport Documentary Film Festival. I am Program Director James Sullivan. We have with us today several filmmakers from our block of short films, Silver Linings, Scenes from a Pandemic. We are, as most of you know by now, we had to kind of make an abrupt about face a few weeks ago and decide to forego most of our in-person events this year for obvious reasons. So we're kind of back in the virtual mode that we ran in last year. We did learn a few things, and one of them was that this setup here, this format, is a fantastic way to get filmmakers together. So while we're missing the Filmmakers Roundtable that we've been doing for years now during the live festival, this opportunity is a great one to sort of make up for that and bring some filmmakers together to discuss their films. We're really excited to show the shorts blocks in particular that we have this year. We have 3 really fun ones, and there's 2 more viewing times, recommended viewing times for the other 2 shorts blocks tomorrow at 12 and 2 if you have any interest. But also just know that these interviews will be archived, and so if anyone wants to watch or recommend to your friends to watch any of the shorts blocks or any of the films for the rest of the week through next Sunday, the 26th, you will be able to access these filmmaker interviews immediately thereafter. And the interviews will also sort of live in perpetuity on our YouTube channel. And we would like to suggest that you, if you haven't already done so, head over to our YouTube page, our YouTube channel, Newburyport Documentary Film Festival, and click on the subscribe button to be given notice about any new content that we might have going up there, which there's been a lot of lately. We have a lot of great interviews. So thanks for being with us. We have 3 of the filmmakers for the 5 films that you hopefully just watched. Scenes from Silver Linings, Scenes from a Pandemic. I'd like to welcome to the screen Michael Kurabet. Is that good, Michael?
Kurabet. Close enough.
Kurabet. I'll get it. I will get it. And Michael is one of 3 co-directors, right? On Lovesick.
Correct.
Is that right? Okay, great. Thanks for being with us. And secondly, I'd like to welcome Gareth Smith, who is the director of Give and Take, which is the film about the free fridges in Brooklyn and across the globe at this point, right?
That's correct.
Hi, Gareth. Thanks for being with us. And Michael is based in Long Beach, California. Gareth is in Brooklyn, New York. Still?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. And then our third filmmaker today is David Rigos. Hi, David.
Hello.
David's film is This Other World, the one that opened the shorts block. David is coming to us from New York as well. Correct?
Yeah, at the moment.
Right. And David was actually with us several years ago. We were talking about this before we got started today. For those of you sort of old timers or longtime supporters of our film festival, David was the producer on Divide and in Concord, which I think we showed 7 or 8 years ago, which was the feature film about sort of the second revolution in Concord, Massachusetts, which was the fight over plastic water bottles and whether or not to ban them in Concord, which I think, if I remember correctly, Concord was the first municipality to take on that battle, right?
Correct. Yeah. It became the first town in the U.S. to ban the sale of single serve bottled water, and it's actually spread to a lot of other places now around Massachusetts as well, especially. So Gene's dream of the drop in the stone in the water and the rings going around has sort of somewhat come to fruition. Yeah.
Right. Well, so let's start with you, David, I guess, because your film started the shorts block. So I think it might have been your film. Gareth's film is explicitly about, something that happened during the pandemic. The idea of actually, did it actually start just before the pandemic?
Yeah,
it did, right?
It actually sort of started before the pandemic, but really grew under the situation of the pandemic.
Right. And Michael's film is clearly about the pandemic and how people have been coping, dealing with their own, various relationship situations during COVID.
Yeah, it's been an entire journey for every couple involved, how COVID
Right.
has affected them personally.
Right. But so David's film, to go back to my first question, I think, is different. You know, it is about COVID, but kind of looking at COVID from a sideways angle. And when I first watched this film, I thought it was just a great way of thinking about COVID, because we were all obviously isolated. Everybody had to learn how to sort of sit with yourself, or your immediate family or your roommates or whatever, and nobody else. And so David, explored the idea of talking to astronauts about what it's like to be out in space as a metaphor for what it's like to be locked down during COVID, I think. Right. And you did not start this film until COVID started, right? You came up with this concept specifically because of the lockdown.
Yeah, well, I was looking to make another space film because for the last few years I had discovered this film festival that was sponsored by NASA in Houston, where you have to use at least 10% NASA archival footage in the short film that you make.
Oh yeah.
So I had made a film the year before, and it did pretty well, and so then this year I started researching. Sorry, last year I was researching, potential other stories that I felt like I wanted to necessarily, focus on enough to make a project about, until I accidentally then came across this article that during lockdown in Spain, where it said that astronauts have the best perspective, or can share a very unique perspective on isolation and quarantine and confinement, because during their training and their missions, they've all had to experience some form of these. And so, I thought that might be something interesting to explore, and that was kind of how the project came about. I actually wasn't going to make the film for the festival because I was doing a couple of other things at the time. And my producer on this project, who was my DOP on the former space project that I made, convinced me on this train trip we were taking to make the film. So I have to give a shout out to my producer on this project, Tomas Ibarra, as well, who said it was a good idea to make this film.
So, because you were making the film initially to submit to this NASA film festival, right? Did that help you get access to the astronauts?
Well, it was what helped me get access was the film that I made the year before, which was called The Most Ideal Place, which is free to watch on Vimeo, and the NASA world loved it because it told the story of the first space station that was built in Spain for the Apollo 11 mission, and so it told this historic story that was probably lost to some aspect of history in the whole sort of public perception of space, of the Apollo 11 story, and so the astronauts, I sent that film to the astronauts that I approached, and they all liked it, and so we're happy to hop on a Skype, on a phone call with me for this project.
So the point I was going to make, and the reason why I wanted to talk to David first about his film, was that your film helped us wrap our heads around. We saw some films submitted that were very much sort of more straightforward looks at, I'm a filmmaker, but I can't go out and do anything. So let's look around my apartment. I'm stuck here, right? And frankly, they weren't that interesting. Mm-hmm. And I think it was your film that initially helped us get our heads around, well, we do have some films that we are absolutely accepting. We love all of your films in this shorts block. And you all take, sort of unique, different looks at the pandemic. So you're all addressing it, but from different angles. So Michael, maybe we'll move over to you next. Can you tell us a little bit about? So obviously you're in the film,
Right.
and at least one of your co-directors is also in the film, talking about his relationship, right?
Right.
Kyle,
So,
right?
correct. So yes, two of the directors are in the film, myself and my co-director Kyle. We kind of had a similar discussion when we were in pre-production. We were talking about how COVID is so personal for everybody. We all have kind of a personal stake in it, and it's so difficult to make a film from conception through execution during a pandemic. So we kind of steered into the skid a little bit of embracing those challenges and making a film that kind of highlighted those challenges. So we have different perspectives of people's relationships, how those have been affected by the pandemic, starting with me, who at the time was a single man.
Oh.
And the challenges of dating and connecting with people during the pandemic, and kind of looking at the life cycle of a relationship is like, okay, starting looking for a relationship. Once you get into a relationship, the natural progression of like integrating each other's lives, looking forward, looking at marriage and family, and basically culminating in that sort of life cycle of a relationship.
So you said at the time you were a single man. So go ahead and give us an update.
That's correct. So at the time that we started filming, it was last November 2020.
Yeah.
We filmed me while I was searching and was still dating. And I am no longer searching. The woman who appears at the end of the film is now my partner.
Yeah.
So we've been together about a little over 7 months now. So
right. Congratulations.
Thank you. Something that wouldn't have happened, or at least as gracefully as it did, taking place in the film.
Right. Well, so, were you sort of like putting yourself out there even more than you might have otherwise been because for the sake of the film? Like, well, geez, I guess I have to be on the apps and the dating apps and all that and I have to be actively searching because that's what my portion of the film is about.
I'll tell you, it was kind of awkward. Like thinking about, like, I had people who I was talking to and was, hadn't quite gotten so far as like with Heather, who's in the movie, about thinking in the back of my head, it's like, okay, is this somebody who I could ask to be in the, like, what does that say about the relationship? And so we had been, talking, dating for a couple weeks when I brought the subject up of like, hey, by the way, I'm making this movie about me looking for a partner during the pandemic. Would you want to be in it? And we both kind of thought about it as like, we obviously have no idea what's going to happen in the future, but if nothing else, we have this time capsule of like, this is how our relationship progressed. We can remember it fondly. And we still remember it fondly. We bring it up at parties all the time.
Right. Oh God. Right. An incredible origin story, right? Everybody wants to hear that story. It's an easy sell if you can tell that story about how you met, right?
Definitely. Everyone's like, oh, that's so romantic. And it's like, yeah, it is.
Right. All right. Let's go to Gareth. Gareth, can you tell me which was the first free fridge that you filmed? Like, at what point did you sort of recognize that this was going on around? Was it the Phoenix one or somewhere else? And at what point did you realize this is going on around me? I should start documenting this.
Well, community fridges have actually been around since just before the pandemic. And, and then in response to the whole year of the pandemic, there are I think there are over 150 fridges in New York City. Now, I think about 90 of them are very active. And I first I actually live very close to where Phoenix is, and I first noticed that they had a fridge. And I didn't really pay that much attention to it, but then I started seeing fridges kind of all over the city. And just notice the way in which it's kind of a strange image, like a fridge on a sidewalk in New York City. And as you keep seeing them more, they're kind of usually have some beautiful artwork on them as well. I just began to become quite interested in kind of how they operate and and thought that I'm sure there is sort of a story behind each fridge. And as I started speaking to volunteers and Phoenix and various kind of people who are involved in the fridge movement, I began to learn about that like kind of microcosm of a story with it, that kind of surrounds each fridge. And so the film is kind of focused on Phoenix, which is a business that started a fridge to support their community, a business that was themselves quite heavily impacted by the pandemic when New York was really the epicenter of it. And then a fridge that's just up the road here, the Bushwick fridge in my neighborhood. And
that was my next question. I was kind of picturing that maybe one of the fridges was sort of right across the street from you or something, where you could sort of say, oh, I can envision just going out every day for a couple of weeks or whatever and taking some shots and seeing what unfolds, right?
Yeah, and really a process of trying to talk to the people and who are involved in the fridges to kind of hear their stories and see how a film might be useful to kind of documenting that and create a place for conversation and dialogue. And so the idea with the film is really to create something that we can create community screenings around the film. And so we had our first community screening last month of the film at the host of the Bushwick fridge. And we're planning one at Phoenix, which is the other kind of business that's featured quite prominently in the film later this year.
So literally just a screening outside on a projected on a wall or something?
Yeah, we're kind of still figuring out the logistics of it, but this first one is actually hosted by a coffee shop, and they've done some film screenings in the past. And so each fridge has a host, a business or a home or someone who can provide electricity and kind of negotiate the permissions of having that fridge there. So there is, each fridge has its own sort of microcosm of community and volunteers and people who use it, and people who support that fridge and contribute to it. It was interesting to learn, and I hope this comes through in the film, that it's not sort of a passive thing that just kind of sits on the sidewalk. It's a very active thing, and people dedicate a large amount of their time to supporting the community fridge.
Right. Did you have any pushback from any? So I'm wondering if I'm guessing that you maybe had a range of reactions to people using the fridges, accessing the fridges, in terms of some probably felt like, I don't want to be on camera, admitting that I need help, and others thinking, I'm happy to be on camera because you're making the point that this is a widespread issue, sort of food insecurity is a widespread issue, and I'm happy to help, you spread the message that needs to be tended to a little better.
Yeah,
or a lot better in this society, right?
Yeah, I think there's kind of two messages about the community fridges. One is sort of that people need help, but the other one is that there is, community fridges sort of symbolize food insecurity, and the media has been very focused on that. But something that I think the film kind of looks at as well is sort of that community fridges also emphasize that there's a lot of food waste, and that here's a way of sort of changing that whole conversation around food and understanding that food is a right and not just a privilege, which is one of the central philosophies of some of the organizations that are really involved in running the fridge. And to your point about sort of consent and collaboration, this film is really much trying to be a collaborative project with each community fridge. And so there was quite a lengthy process of kind of discussion, especially as the film gets quite personal for some people who use the fridge. That's a totally collaborative process with those people.
Right. Can you give us a sense? I'd like to ask each of you guys this. I know I mentioned David's past festival experience with us. Let's get off. I was just going to ask you that, producer Steve. Get everybody up here. So David's, a filmmaker who's been doing this for a little while. In fact, has another short film that we're showing tomorrow as part of another one of our shorts blocks. So you had two short films accepted into our festival this year. But Gareth, can you give me a sense of your history as a filmmaker?
So I actually work as a DP. That's sort of my main job.
Yep.
But this is my first film that I've directed. So I've worked closely with a number of other directors in their films as their DP. But I was very fortunate to collaborate with Justin Levy, who's a producer here in New York, and he produced this film. He actually also produced Snowy, which is also, I think,
Oh,
very
yeah,
cool.
we have that one. That's actually in the shorts block that David's film other film is in tomorrow. Yeah.
And so there was a lot of kind of a big learning curve for me, and collaborating with other filmmakers, as this was my first attempt at making a short doc.
Did you shoot it, Gareth?
Yes. Yeah.
It was beautifully shot. It was.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it would look gorgeous. Yeah.
Yes, I was going to say the same thing. So it comes through loud and clear that you're a director of photography, that you know what you're doing with behind the camera. And then, Michael, can you tell me a little bit about your relationship with your friendship with your co-directors, and the extent of all of your experience with filmmaking to date?
Yeah, so all of my teammates, we kind of came from 3 very different backgrounds in film. I come from a more journalistic background. I did print journalism, and then as part of my undergrad career, finished a degree in documentary, and I had shot a few short documentaries. My co-director, Kyle, he was a master's student in documentary, so he had a little bit more experience. He was doing kind of the same thing as me, producing a lot of shorts independently, kind of a one-man shooter, editor, director, taking place all at once. And then our third director, Liam, he is narrative focused. He's never really done documentaries. He's done documentary courses at our university, Chapman University. But it was kind of a whole new world for all of us to be put onto a team together with very minimal knowledge of what each other's skill set was, and learning to adapt with one another, learning what our key strengths are, what our creative minds look like when they're working together, who's going to shoot what, who's going to direct, who's going to ask the questions, what kind of sometimes arguing about what an edited sequence ought to look like, but eventually we all got on the same page and are super pleased with the final product.
Are you all grad students at Chapman?
So I am a grad student. I was a first year during production of the film. Kyle just graduated from his grad program.
Yeah.
Liam is actually an undergrad still. So
okay.
He was a sophomore undergrad at Chapman's film school, and now is a third year.
So we just kicked off the first ever college student film award today. Actually, we had an event where we asked college students around Boston, obviously Boston full of great high institutions of higher learning and lots of great film schools, and so we asked students to submit their films. We showed 6 student films today. We're giving one of the students an award tonight, and I'm not from, you're on the West Coast. Tell me a little bit about Chapman. Is it is it a well-known film program?
Yes, it is. Particularly on the West Coast, it's well known. And for people working in LA, we are more of a production-oriented program, so everybody has a chance to work behind the scenes, behind the camera, editing. In the documentary program, that's the area that I have the most expertise. You start learning the basics of visual storytelling, and kind of shooting different concepts. And then in the undergrad program, you can go more of the broadcast news direction and working in the control room, doing live broadcasting, more news packages. Or you can go the doc track, which is more film production. And then your final thesis project for that is you develop, shoot, edit a short of about 20 minutes in length on your own. So as part of my undergrad, I did that. Kyle did the same thing as part of his grad thesis. And this was the production of Lovesick was actually a separate course from that, where we actually got to put a team together.
Great. All right. I think I have one more question for each of you. Same question for each of you. I am curious if you can tell me, sort of on the subject of learning the art of documentary filmmaking, if there's a specific film or filmmaker that particularly inspired you at some point in your development towards becoming a documentary filmmaker? I guess we'll start with Michael, since we just had you on screen. So I'll ask you that first.
One of my documentary inspirations was I got the opportunity to study more of Barbara Koppel's films.
Yeah.
Especially doing more verite shooting. That's kind of what I gravitated towards as an undergrad, and we kind of implemented elements of that in Lovesick. And we actually had the chance to meet her during post-production, and she actually was kind enough to view some when we were early on in post-production. She viewed some of our selects and gave us notes
for Lovesick.
Yes.
Cool. Okay. So Barbara Koppel, Harlan County, right? What, do you want to mention a couple of her classic films?
Yeah. Barbara Koppel's done Harlan County, USA, which is about the coal miner strike in the 70s in Harlan County, Kentucky. She did, oh my goodness, I'm blanking on the name of the other one, the Hormel factory. Same kind of concept. If anybody can help me with the name on that, but it was,
I can't think of it either. Yeah.
Oh goodness, somebody's gonna
no problem.
Get me hard for that.
Don't worry.
But yes, it was about factory workers in the Hormel meat factory, kind of rising up against management.
Hang on one second. Yeah, American Dream.
American Dream.
Yes, and I always remember, for some reason, she made the weird film about Woody Allen. Woody Allen's jazz, side trip as a jazz musician.
That's right. She did mention that when we were, not to make it sound like BFFs with Barbara Koppel, but like,
no, that's very cool that she gave you notes on your film. That's great. Yeah, great. How about you, Gareth? Anybody? So I'm guessing it's somebody who's sort of mostly about shooting or camera work or an eye, right?
Well, I was actually thinking of Joan Churchill, who's just an incredible documentary cinematographer. I think she sort of co-directed some films with Nick Broomfield. But I think for me that was like a major lesson to kind of go and actually figure out who was filming a film that I really liked, and then try to sort of get into the head of that cinematographer and understand how they might be approaching the project. But I think documentary is really fascinating in that sense of sort of the relationship between the director and the cinematographer. Because in documentary, I feel like it relies a lot on the cinematographer to be making some pretty difficult decisions, or kind of reading the director in a way that is non-verbal most of the time. If you're doing verite work, which is mostly what I'm interested in. But so I'm interested in those, and then I'm also like a very avid Werner Herzog film. I just watched everything he's made, and love listening to him.
I'm sorry, I missed that. I don't know if anybody else did, but I missed. Who'd you say?
Werner Herzog.
Oh, sure, of course.
Yeah,
right. I just couldn't hear you. Yeah.
I'm just very interested, especially in there is just an abundance of talks that he's given, and kind of learning a little bit about how he approaches especially the documentary interview. And I just think there's a lot, that I've gained from listening to him speak as well.
I still have not watched Grizzly Man for some reason. I can't believe that I haven't gotten whatever. It's just something that's slipped through the cracks for me. I guess I have to do that now, right?
Yes.
I mean, I know how it ends. So maybe right. Okay, and then Michael. No, I'm sorry, David. Do you want to? Can you answer the same question for me?
There's probably two that spring to mind immediately. The first was Errol Morris.
Yeah.
And for this film, especially for this other world, where it was totally archival based, I love the style that Errol Morris incorporates in his films, and often creative uses of archival and reconstructions. And actually, that the initial idea for this other world was to blend archival and have very beautiful Errol Morris-esque type reconstructions for some of it. And then we just ran out of time and was like, you know what? We've got all this archival material is free. Let's just turn it into a totally archival doc. But the first name that usually springs to mind for me is Godfrey Reggio. And I saw Baraka first, which Godfrey didn't make, but his cinematographer that he works with often, Ron Frick, made that. But then, and Baraka blew me away. But then when I saw Koyaanisqatsi, on the big screen, that film kind of changed my idea of what a film could be. The fact that it was, this documentary just an essay told just through image and music with no dialogue, and be so profound and powerful, and Philip Glass music and time-lapse photography and whatever 75 millimeter film, that sort of experience of what cinema can be on such a almost divine level. And then once I started finding out about Godfrey Reggio, that he came from this the brother, like he was a monk before he became a filmmaker. And so he has this, obviously had studied the importance of divinity and in nature and in the human experience. And Koyaanisqatsi is probably the film that I've seen more than any other documentary. I think, like, if there's ever a chance to see it on the big screen, I'm there. And then the sort of one of the highlights of my, I guess, cinema going days was when the Sydney Festival, Philip Glass came out with an orchestra and played live to Koyaanisqatsi. It was like, all right, that's it. I didn't think I'm not going to beat this one. It was incredible. Yeah. So
talk about a film that, or what you can get out of multiple watches of a film. I mean, the films, Koyaanisqatsi and the related films are, I mean, you could watch them endlessly, basically, right?
And those have always been my favorite kind of films, whether it's documentary or narrative. But I'd never seen a documentary like that before, where there is this element of magic and philosophy and the ability to leave the audience in wonder. And again, every viewing you pick up something different. You pick up a different connection. And then a few years ago, actually, I was working on a project, and the assistant editor had worked with Godfrey Reggio, and I was like, oh my God, like, what was and he just said he's this like creative genius, eccentric creative genius, and there's sort of not much more to it. But he's for me probably one of my heroes.
Great.
Filmmaking world.
Well, I'm glad I asked. Let's bring everybody back for a second, if we can, producer Steve, just to say thank you. Gareth, thanks so much for being with us. Michael, thank you for being with us. David, thank you for being with us. I think we might be seeing you again tomorrow. Is that, or I don't know, but is that true? Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right, great. So I'll just end by saying we look forward to seeing what each of you produces next. And we are very proud to have your current films in the festival this week. For anybody who's getting to the end of this interview and watched the shorts block and enjoyed it, which I expect you will say you did, please tell your friends and have them share it, and have them stream it too, available through next Sunday. Thanks again, guys. I hope to see you again soon. We would like to close out just by sending another shout out to our sponsors, without which we could not do this. Thanks, guys. See you soon.
Thank you so much, James.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.